From We Are Spectacular, this is the Spectacular Marketing Podcast, a podcast about everything brand, marketing, digital and social for the food and drink industry and beyond. What an epic episode we have for you today. It's with the wondrous Martin Morales. It's so great and life-affirming to see Martin today. And apologies, there are a few coughs and splutters today as we're both suffering from the cold as we head to the end of this incredible summer. As you can expect, we talk all things Peru, his incredible life story, including his early life in Lima, all the way through to launching Ceviche Andina. We talk lots and lots and lots about one of our favourite joint subjects, which is music, including his record label career, helping to launch iTunes, his DJing career, and about Martin's work with the incredible, inspiring and amazing Scottish artist, Katie Tunstall. So it gives me incredible joy to welcome another suffering patient into the Spectacular Marketing Podcast today, Mr. Martin Morales.
It gives me incredible joy to be seated next to you. Thank you so much.
So, yeah, we're both a little bit man-flued up today. You're worse than me, I think.
I think so, but, you know, we'll move on. It'll be fine. We'll push up. We'll push forward.
And we've both got trainer envy of each other, I think, haven't we? In some way?
Indeed. Bright orange trainers.
For
a semi-sunny day, going into autumn. This is how we uplift people around the world, eh?
Well, we should be doing it for the gram. We need to get some Instagram photos of this later on, or something like that. So we've got, I guess, a lot to talk about. All things Peruvian,
yeah,
which is, as everyone knows, the greatest football strip in the world.
Yeah, indeed, and there's pretty good food as well.
Of course, but man, as a little boy growing up, I was obsessed with that strip, and I knew all the important stats from the Ladybird World Cup book.
That's right,
because you played Scotland.
Indeed, and in 1978,
that's it.
Cubillas and his goal will always be remembered.
And I was 2 years old then.
Right?
You don't want to say?
I was about 4, 5.
That's not too bad. So it's going to be an amazing episode. I'm so glad Martin's here. I was just concerned he was going to call me off because he's so busy. So I'm really glad. And also it gave me the excuse to spend a bit more money and get a nice studio rather than the sweat box that we're usually in. So thank you for that, which is really exciting. So there was a couple of things then. I want to speak as least as I can and get Martin to speak as much as he can, as long as his throat allows. So I was going to just get straight into it and really, I guess, start at the start, which is always a good place to begin, and really just talk about, your journey, and without saying to Love Island or whatever, and where did it all begin? This wonderful journey, how you became the amazing MM.
I was born in Peru to an English father and a Peruvian mother. I lived in Lima, the capital city, for 11 years, loving many things, loving my family, my great aunts who taught me how to cook, my grandmother who lived in the Andes, and she was a farmer, and so loving going to visit her, loving the friendships I had in Lima, loving the sea, the surf. I was a surfer for many years as a child. I had a relationship with the sea that was so powerful and so liberating, so intense. And of course, loving the food that I grew up with, partly because it was cooked by people that loved me, and they showed their love through that cooking and that food and those flavors and those ingredients, but also through the process of cooking. You know, it was very communal, very caring, very sharing. So I would accompany my great aunts to the market and just to understand what food is about, where it comes from, and how you prepare it. And those flavors and those moments and those people never left me. But my life was torn apart when I was 11, and the Shining Path guerrillas had taken over 2/3 of the country. my grandmother's village was taken over by them, and we didn't hear from them for 2 years because there was no access of communication in or out, or at least definitely no physical access. And people around us that we knew were being killed. Simple people, humble people, and all kinds of people, poor people, wealthy people, mostly farmers and indigenous people in the countryside where the concentration of the Shining Path was. And so we had relatives, we had friends, we had people we knew that were in real trouble, and that created a major tension in Lima as a capital city, where bombs were going off in shopping centres, in banks, car bombs were going off on the streets, and we heard them, and we lived in this real violence. And as a child, as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old child, it was petrifying. And so, it came to a head when my father got a letter from the Shining Path saying that he was one of several people from the company that he worked at, an American company, and they wanted to kill them all. And they wanted a ransom, and from that moment on, our life got even more scarier, even scarier and even more dangerous. So we lived with armed guards in our house. I remember the moment where I was dragged out of school. The headmaster came looking for me in a class, and he shouted, "Where's Martin?" And I was like, "What the hell have I done? I've not done anything. I was a little saint at school, He dragged me out of the class and drove me home, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And we got to my house, and the house was surrounded by sort of armed men, and it was, sort of military police. And I just thought, what the hell, what's going on? I was 10 years old, and to see my dad in a corner being sort of lectured by an army general, looking absolutely petrified, it was just, so painful. So yeah, that moment really changed us. And changed the course of my life. And from that moment onwards, as I said, we lived under armed guards. And my father subsequently, a year later, said, "This is enough. I want to go back to my own country." And so that was the catalyst for us to move to the UK, into somewhere safer, where I could take again the love of my country, the love of our food, the love of my family. Sadly, not the love of my ocean, the Pacific, to the UK, and that has stayed with me for a long time, and that's something that never left.
And where did you move to?
So I moved to, when we first got here in the mid-80s, I moved to a place called Colville in Leicestershire. It's a working class town, a tough, troubled town that was. It's a mining town. That really suffered through the Thatcher years, through the closing of the mines. The brutality of that plan to close the mines so aggressively and leave people out of work and destroy whole communities by the government at the time was really affected Colville. So it was a town that we landed in where there was high unemployment. We landed there because my father's brother was living there and developing houses, or trying to. It was interesting. It was, he was from Leicester, my father, but we ended up in a town outside of that, and it was a tough place to be. Unfortunately, I had a year of suffering from severe racism, physical and verbal racism. But as an 11-year-old child, that was hard to take. But again, that made me strong and made me focus on the beauty of my original country, and made me think, gosh, one day, I'm not very strong, and I haven't got a fist to punch people out of the way, or I didn't want to kill them or anything like that, but I just thought this is just plain ignorance, and people, if they were only sort of enthused by something that was outside their own realm, they could be open-minded and enjoy other things from other countries, and for me that was food and music and art from Peru and other places. So that was a real inspiration, and I followed my career doing that kind of work to hopefully enrich people's lives.
And then from Colville, where did you head off to?
So from Colville, well, I studied in Loughborough afterwards, which was lovely. I studied I finished my secondary school, and there was much more mixed community of English people, of local people, of Italians, and then I studied in Leicester City, in the city centre, did my A-levels there, and again, it's a very multicultural city. It's a wonderful city with Indian and Pakistani and Afro-Caribbean people. And then I went to Leeds University, and at Leeds University, Leeds and Yorkshire is an incredible area of the UK. Leeds is a very progressive, very creative centre. Smaller than Manchester, but has as much creativity, as much music scene, art scene. And I studied at Leeds University, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. There I started to have a radio show. There I started to DJ at clubs. My interest for cooking really, grew, and I started to do events featuring food and music. And I loved that moment. That period was one of the most exciting in my life.
Brilliant. And was there a special name for the club nights or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we used to do a descarga night. Descarga means when you kind of jam session for Latin music. So I used to run a night there. And there was a night that we used to run called the Global Kitchen, where I would DJ and cook at the same time, and because I wanted to put all my passions into one place. So I was always been a fan of music and food from around the world, from Spain, Italy, from India, from Brazil, these countries with great rich cultures, China, and so Cuba. So I kind of sort of enjoyed researching and enjoyed playing music from those countries, and sometimes cooking dishes from those places. And people seemed to like it. Leeds was a very clubby town, so I would play in the back rooms of great big dance nights, and it was we were in the midst of the first wave of dance music. Mm-hmm. So I was a resident at Vague. I was a resident at Manumission in Manchester, which then went to Ibiza. I used to DJ in Sheffield and DJ here in London at the Mambo Inn, which was just such an eye-opener and so groundbreaking. And I would, sometimes do the main floor or do the back room, but, alongside, the Sashas and Digweeds and sort of Pete Tongs of this world, but I was kind of slightly unknown. But yeah, I've had a lovely time, DJing with, Norman Jay and Giles Peterson and Joey Negro and those kind of guys when we were we used to do a lot of the festivals. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of fun. Music, studying was hugely important for me, but I also, I guess I like to fill my time. At that point, I enjoyed filling my time with work as much as possible. So studying was hugely important. I did my best at that, but also at creating really interesting projects for me to work on, whether it's doing little radio shows or whether it's doing club nights or DJing or creating events, producing concerts, live music concerts.
But back then, especially with the food side of things, that was pretty groundbreaking stuff, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, the sort of restaurants and bars were just in their infancy in a way, trying to find their way. There was a huge division of what was cool, what was interesting, and so yeah, trying to put food at alongside music in a venue was quite interesting, I guess, because people had traditional ways of eating out, which were basically based around, you eat before 8 o'clock, and then you go out to a wine bar, and then you go out or a pub, and then you go out to a club and dance till 3 a.m. or whatever. But things have changed, and I guess we were trying to do things a little bit differently there. Maybe because we knew that in other countries there's a different format. In Spain, people don't eat till 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. They don't eat until 10 o'clock. I mean, it's completely different to here. In some other places they might eat earlier. Yeah. And now the changing nature of the way people are eating, people sometimes have diets that they don't eat after 5 o'clock. Or they don't eat before 2 p.m.
Yeah. So yeah, we're trying things out, you know.
And killer DJ name as well, without having to change your name.
That's right.
A good name you've got.
Well, I had a DJ name also called Global Local.
Okay.
Because I was used to think, think global at local or something like that. And then, and when I was in Mexico for a year, strangely, I went to Mexico as part of my university degree for a whole year, and I went there also as a rest from the DJing, because I'd been DJing by then all around Europe, not just the UK. And I went to Mexico to work as part of my degree and work as an English teacher.
Wow.
But on the plane, I met a rave promoter and a Buddhist monk, and I made friends with both of them. One was like, one was a blessing, spiritual blessing, and the other one was a sinful kind of direction. But I enjoyed them both, and I enjoyed meeting them both. But the rave promoter said, "Oh, I've heard your name. I've heard you've DJed at all these clubs. Why don't you come and DJ with me?" I was like, "Well, I wanted a break from all of that." But he convinced me, and so I did a few raves. But my full name is Martin Alan Morales. Martin. Alan comes from my father's side, and Morales from my mother's side. Most people know me as Martin Morales because I've used that for many years in this country. But in Mexico, the rave promoter says, "Well, you can't call yourself Martin Morales because that's just like standard." So I called myself DJ Alan.
Oh, right.
So for a whole year I was DJ Alan, playing mainly drum and bass and acid jazz and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun.
Acid jazz, like that was a huge thing for me. Back in the day, I was huge into corduroy and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I loved loved the acid jazz stuff. And then I don't know if you've caught, just while we're on this subject, there's the Man from Mowax documentary that's just came out about James Lavelle. That's an interesting watch.
I'm dying to see it.
It's all right, it's good.
Yeah.
Good watch. I mean,
I've still got some 12s, some Mowax 12s, some DJ Crush, DJ Shadow. Just fantastic.
Shadow's unbelievable.
I was hearing a radio show the other day, and they were saying they're going to do the last half hour of their show. It was Giles Peterson's show, who I'm a huge fan of, and I love to bits his show and his production. And he said he's going to play the last half hour, and I thought, I wonder if they'll play one of my favourite Mowax tracks, which is Spot with a Beard, Palmskin Productions. It's just a mental, hard, fast jazz dance track. Really, really fun.
To check that out. But yeah, it was well worth watching. So it's streaming on all the things now. It was out in the cinema and it just came out straight away, pretty much.
Yeah, I heard. I've not seen it yet.
So very good.
Dying to see it.
So then, proper jobs. So what happened after that?
I got one of my lecturers was a lady called Di Burton. She was quite inspiring, and she treated me like a friend, and she really it's amazing how people can inspire you. And luckily at Leeds I had some great inspiration. I had a gentleman who was Peruvian who taught me Spanish literature called Roberto Rodriguez. I had another lecturer called Rob, and another lecturer called Di Burton. And Di Burton, Di is sort of head of sort of marketing and PR, and she really inspired me. And she said, "You should enter this awards that's called the Institute of Directors International Marketing Awards." And so I entered that. I did a whole sort of thesis on international marketing, and I won. And through that, I got offered a job in London, and so I packed my bags and drove down to London and started a job working in a translation company in Charlotte Street. And after 6 months, just realised it was not my thing. And so I spent the next 6 months applying for record labels jobs. All the time, I'd been also a silver service waiter, a commie chef, and I'd run bars when I was even back when I was in Leicester. I used to run bars and been a barman, as well as working in some fine dining restaurants, doing minor roles. But when I came down here, I had my DJing I could do as well. So, but I really, really wanted to get into the music industry. So after 6 months and 73 rejection letters, which I still keep, it's funny when you get a rejection letter. Or in the old days when you did, maybe now it's all on email, but I used to get the printed one. If if people bother to respond back, you always read that first sentence, and if it starts with a U, you know it's going to be negative, and that means unfortunately. But I saw about 73 unfortunately's.
That's so interesting you kept them, though.
Yeah.
What was going on that you kept them?
Well...
was it determination? Or
Yeah. Well, at that point in my life, I think I used to use trauma, I used to use pain to really motivate me.
Interesting.
To turn it into a positive. And if you have a reminder of it, it's a safe reminder. It's, it's a kind of, in a way, a scar wound.
I can understand, yeah.
And if you look at your scar wound every time, you go, well, I'm never going to let that happen to me again. And that's going to drive me on. And I used to use that. And so, yeah, but after 6 months and 73 rejection letters, someone called me up, someone in Bath, and they said, we think we've got a role for you. When do you think you can start? And I was, basically unemployed and, properly on the breadline and living at friends' houses by then. Luckily, I met this amazing young woman who became my girlfriend called Lucy, and she used to help me apply for jobs and really encourage me and bring me up from when I was feeling down after the many unfortunates that I had. And she was by my side, and she used to spell check my applications and all kinds of stuff. So with Lucy, I went to Bath the next day. I said to the guy that called me about the job, who said, we think we've got a job for you. When can you come? And I said, well, I'll have to ask my current employer, when I could go. But of course I had no one. But you can't tell them you're unemployed. So I called half an hour later, says, yeah, I can come tomorrow. And I was and in Lucy's little Renault 5, clapped out Renault 5, we drove to Bath the next day and for the interview. And that was the beginning of me working for a little record label in Bath where we had the most amazing time, where I started from scratch, learning everything from making the tea for the boss to recording artists in Cuba and working with many of the stars from the Buena Vista Social Club.
Whoa!
Recording in Peru and understanding the music business as well.
Wow! So then Bath being a nice place to live, wasn't it? I mean, that must have been pretty beautiful.
Bath was gorgeous, yeah. I had a wonderful time, very peaceful place, and I always sort of swore that I'd go back to live there and raise my children there, but I haven't still. But yeah, it's wonderful, beautiful.
A nice restaurant scene as well.
Nice. It was okay at the time, but Bath is a beautiful part of this country in many ways. I always remember living in Leeds, and I loved Hebden Bridge because of its liberal tendencies. It's sort of just very open-minded, almost hippie kind of tendencies. But who cares? These people and these type of thinkers are beautiful and fascinating and selfless, and they're in touch with nature. And Bath didn't quite have that, but it did have, when you go to, and I've travelled a lot, different cities in the UK, particularly pretty cities like York and Oxford and Cambridge, and cities that are Roman or have a lot of history and heritage of this country, you find sometimes there's still a dominance of wealth or aristocracy, and still a bit of a snobbiness, which is unfortunate. Bath doesn't seem to have that, and I think that's probably because of the influence from, Druids or something like that in the 60s, probably, even acid and drugs and that kind of vibe that helped liberate some of those people from their pompousness and their upperclassness, and just went, you know what, this is all cool and we're all happy, and, let's do more summers of love. And so you find, just a bit more down-to-earthness there that I like, as well as a bit more bohemianness in Bath. By no means is it an equal society, and by no means it's massively multicultural, but being next to Bristol, which has always been a gateway into Britain in a way for migrants, there is a good vibe that goes on in Bath, thanks to Bristol and thanks to the Druids, I guess, and thanks to the LSD.
And then after that, were you headed back to London?
So I had I spent 3 years at Toomey Records, sort of producing, making the tea, doing a bit of marketing, doing a bit of PR, doing a bit of product management, as we call them, creating these little kind of albums and packages and CDs. And then I worked for, I was headhunted by a company that was starting called Union Square Music, which were just, there were these 5 guys that were super talented compilation makers. Mm-hmm. And they'd started this new company, and I was the fresh blood. And so I became a label manager there. And for 4 years, I had an incredible time just creating compilations, collections of music, and producing them, from, art directing to selecting the type of themes that we're going to do, to actually working with journalists to write sleeve notes, to working with graphic designers to do all the packaging and artwork, and then working on marketing with those, and as well as working with distributors all around the world, from the US or all over Europe. So we worked with all kinds of catalogues, and I produced all kinds of compilations of different artists, including sort of Lee Scratch Perry, and if we stick in Jamaica, King Tubby, and if we go into Latin America or New York, also we'd look at the salsa guys, Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, and then South Africa, Miriam Makeba, or Brazil, Georgie Ben. If you kind of look at Western, British or American sounds, you could look at jazz. So I produced compilations for Chet Baker and John Coltrane, but also for Stiff Records catalogues like Tracy McCall and Reckless Eric, and so it was just fascinating. We did a lot of funk records, Afrobeat records, club records, chill out records. So I was able to license and talk to and work with people that ran catalogues, and also artists in all these genres. And it was fascinating because the people I worked with, Peter Stack and Steve Bunyan, who's a huge friend, were just lovely, inspiring, creative, commercial, interesting people that appreciated what I brought into the equation and my energy, I guess. And a lot of our work was working with European markets. So that gave me a real insight into how people in Europe consume, digest, absorb culture, and what their likes and dislikes are. So that was really, really interesting as well.
And I guess how to influence those different markets at different times with different products, and it's quite complex. That as well. absolutely, and it's always a team effort. It's that's where I learned in that job at that time, by having a team of 5 or 6 people working alongside me or working with me, who had all very strong opinions and great experience, plus working with, the head buyer at Virgin Records, or the head buyer at HMV, or the head buyer at R Price, or Fnac in France, or the programmer for Los 40 Principales in Spain, and just working with them and just saying, what would you like to see in your shops and on your radio? What are you enjoying? What gaps are there in the market? What what are people enjoying? And so if you get a collection of ideas and feedback and opinions, you can start formulating sometimes real truths that come out of that. If you hear the same thing going on and on. So that's where we thought, okay, there's a gap in the market for Mediterranean music. Yeah. Or there's a real need here for, Polish jazz, or actually, no one's really done a great compilation of Brazilian music. Yeah. Or this country is going to really like the Ian Dury record, but this country won't. Yeah. So you kind of, you work with people, work with a team, listen to the variety of opinions, and then you craft something together. You lead that and guide that and make some decisions and edit stuff, because not everyone is going to be right. But it's that subtlety of understanding where you're going to listen to your advice and where you're going to stop and say, no, I think they're wrong, or I'm going to take a chance with going against the grain or from that person's opinion. That's a fascinating moment. Because when I was a kid, I worked in Our Price, and it always amazed me, like the head office used to just automatically, it was almost like computer says no thing, automatically would send us up 100 copies of 100 R&B hits, and it was the west coast of Scotland, right? And just culturally, not anything racist, just culturally, R&B at that time wasn't sticking. It was all about, people were buying ABBA Gold, Eurythmics, Bob Marley, Pink Floyd, getting their smoke on or whatever, and they were probably buying the Proclaimers and the Corries and some folk stuff, and that was kind of the repertoire, or whatever was in the charts. And then the bosses would come up from England and kick the crap out you for not selling this, 40 R&B grooves, and you're going, but the market doesn't, they just genuinely don't want that, and stop automatically sending us this stuff, and it's like...
I think the bosses that find out more about how to, going back to my little global local, think global but at local. Think global in terms of, have big ideas, but also, listen to what people are saying down on the ground.
Yeah.
And they could have, probably not had that arrogance that came from, London-centric thinking, which is a bubble, as you know, and then and listen to what you actually wanted or needed, and how you could actually work your audiences and improve something to make better sales. They probably thought they were justified also because some of those albums are TV advertised.
Sure.
And so they thought, TV advertised, TV's reaching the screens of people in that area of Scotland. So surely they're going to want to buy that. But, TV doesn't necessarily, it's not a slam dunk, even if it's on TV. But then there's the pressure of, spending all that money on TV. That's a whole other world. We didn't work on TV advertised albums.
Yeah.
The markets that we worked were much more alternative, much more niche. In fact, some of the products that I worked on we used to call them mid-price albums. So that gave us less pressure, and we had to sell 5, 10, 15,000 copies instead of the 200 or 500,000, which, companies like Ministry of Sound and Universal Global used to have to do, or BMG TV, I think they called it.
Yes.
So
I remember when I was doing my filing, all the mid-price and the top, all that stuff. Knew my alphabet very well. So moving on from there, more music stuff.
Yeah. So I used to go to a conference every year called MIDEM. It's in the south of France, in Cannes. It was the most
tough life.
It was wonderful. I mean, but it was. I went there for about 12 years running, and in this conference there was 10,000 delegates in the south of France,
all perfectly sober.
All perfectly sober. All but we were always in this conference room that was gigantic. This kind of conference center, the Palais or whatever it's called in Cannes, and everyone went there, and it was such a hustle. It was crazy. Everyone was trying to sign records. Everyone was trying to do business. And I remember we used to have a booth at Union Square I remember having 36 meetings in one day. And it was trying to sell each of those records that I was putting together, sometimes about 100 a year, frankly. And we're trying to sell them to all the distributors across all the different territories. And that's what you were doing. You're spending one-to-one presentations for each one. Gosh, it was crazy. But in that event, which was also full of fun, I remember the first year I got there, I was in the sort of opening party night, and I turned around and there was Billy Joel just standing right next to me, and I thought, oh my God, it's Billy Joel! And I remember the second night, it was the Fania All Stars live on stage, and I'm a huge Fania records collector, which Fania were the originators and the kings of salsa, Latin music in New York in the late 60s to the late 70s. And they reformed just for this conference, sort of in the late 90s that I went to play live. And at the conference, the live shows, there's no backstage. You could walk in and just have a chat, and there's none of this audience versus talent. We're all in the business. So everyone's a VVIP. Everyone had a VVIP pass. So I was able to meet some of my favorite artists in the Latin world. But at the conference, you also made lots of contacts. And one of them was this guy that used to run this label called Relentless, and used to run a label called Outcast Records. And he said to me, look, we've got a lot of success with Relentless, with urban music, with garage. They just signed a little quiet band called the So Solid Crew from South London, and they said, look, can you come and join us, because we'd like to start a record label that focuses on non-urban music. And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, you could go into dance, you could go into indie, you could go into rock, you could go into electronic music. And I was like, that sounds cool. And I'd never...
So almost like everything else.
Everything else, yeah. And I'd never been sort of an A&R, which is the role that he was offering me, as well as a label manager. A&R means artist and repertoire, and it means you work crafting not just the deal with an artist you want to sign and finding that artist, but also crafting the record and launching it, and then probably running the campaign of marketing to try and make it successful. And I thought that was an incredible challenge. I was super excited about it, and so I joined, and I inherited a label called Outcast, which had Nitin Sawhney on that label, which is an incredible talent. And
did Nitin Sawhney get a Mercury?
I think he did, yeah.
Mercury's on Thursday, right?
Yeah.
This weekend.
And some I inherited a lot of sort of British Asian artists, and so I sort of said to him, well, we need to sort of look at, if this label is focused around world music and progressive and sort of interesting world music that is not completely just focused on just folk roots world music, we need to open that up from the British Asian scene. So I had a fabulous time. I signed a band called Oy Vey Voy, which is like a Jewish klezmer kind of electronic Massive Attack type band.
That's a good name.
British band, but with sort of influences from all kinds of places in Europe and the Middle East. And I introduced we needed a singer for the band, and I looked for the best singer I could find, and there was this one girl that was unsigned, that was looking for a deal, that I just sort of fell in love with her voice, and her name was Katie Tunstall. And so I introduced her to the band with the idea that hopefully I'd sign her. And so she joined the band just as a vocalist to help on the record, or the first record of Oy Vey Voy. She even a Ladino song was written for the album, and Ladino is an ancient Jewish language, but with Spanish undertones or roots. And please forgive me if I'm not quite accurate about the description, but I taught her how to pronounce and sing those Spanish-influenced language used in that song. So she sang that, and actually the song is called Ladino Song. And she sang several other songs on that record. She was a guest vocalist, and I got on really well with her, and then a few months later I signed her. She joined us, her career is fabulous. Her beginning is fabulous. She's originally from Fife, and she was 26, I think, when we signed her, and nobody else really gave her the credit and really wanted to sign her. At the time, the industry was always looking for very young, very pretty people. Maybe things haven't changed too much. She's a beautiful person, a beautiful looking person as well, but hugely talented. But some people say the wrong side of 25 at the time. And the fact that she was 26 and she had co-written or written 120 songs that I'd heard of, I just thought, oh my God, this lady is an incredible writing talent, incredible vocal talent, incredible performer, super charismatic. She's got so much to give to the world. And I just, from day one when I met her, I really admired her as a person. And so we signed her, and she believed a little bit in me and a little bit in the record label I was working for. And she certainly believed in her talent, which is the most important thing.
It's still her Jules Holland appearance, one of the first ones that sticks so much in my head, where she's playing the tambourine with her foot and she's got the loop pedal, way before any Ed Sheeran stuff was ever seen. That you were just like, Christ, this girl's woman is so uber talent. Like, you couldn't believe the talent. You were just like, where's this voice coming from?
Yeah.
Where's this, And there's a great documentary on it at the moment, called Rip It Up, which is the story of Scottish pop, and she's on one of them. And what she talks about is our first album being taken away, the raw songs, and being tweaked by the production. And she says she was slightly horrified when it came back about how much it had been changed. But then she said, would I change it? And then she goes, no, I wouldn't, because of the success of... Because she's like, I wouldn't have known what to have done with it to make it so good. So, you know, yeah, it was amazing.
So I led that.
Yeah.
I led that moment. I was there.
That's amazing.
That was me with Katie.
Amazing.
And I can tell you how tough that was. Yeah. We had no budget to sign her, let alone to make an album. We had success with So Solid Crew, Daniel Bedingfield and DJ Pied Piper, and 3 number ones in 1 year. That had not been done since Stock Aitken and Waterman for an independent company. But we had no budget, The company had gone bankrupt, actually, and had been resurfaced away from Ministry of Sound, where the deal first was, and had resurfaced at EMI under a new deal. But we had no budget. So I said to my boss, well, I'm going to create money by starting a compilations company. Hey-ho, I knew how to do that. And by starting a little drum and bass vinyl label, because I knew that could make money as well, to bring cash flow in to sign artists. We missed out on James Blunt. We missed out on The Darkness, which is 2 other acts I wanted to sign. And we nearly missed out on Joss Stone, but we got Katie. And with some of the money, I think, that we generated from those other projects that I'd started in an entrepreneurial way, I guess, we signed Katie. Tiny budget for production. But I thought, let's see how we can create real, producers, the best producers in the world to want to work with her.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about the money, let's talk about the talent. And so I arranged a little gig for her. This is well before her record was produced. Obviously, in the 12 Bar Club just up the road in Denmark Street. Tiny place that fits 25 people, and a stage the size of a bath. And she played there, but I invited lots of fantastic producers. I sent them a set of 5 demos out of the 120 that I had. And some wonderful people turned up, producers that had produced for U2, for Rolling Stones, for the biggest acts of the day. And they all turned up, and some of them were proteges of each other. They were like, blimey, what are you doing here?
It's almost like a family tree.
Tree of these guys, and they just thought, bloody hell, this guy Martin's just got us into this room, and we're all gagging for it. And they obviously heard Katie sing and perform and play her guitar and the songs that she played, and they completely were bowled over by her. So the next day I had loads of calls saying, I'd like to produce her. And then it was a case of saying, well, this is the only budget we've got. Are you still interested? And a guy called Steve Osborne, fantastic producer, produced some many great albums for indie and rock bands, some of the most talented and biggest artists in the world, said, I'll produce her. And so we did a deal with him, and he actually put her up in her house because there was no budget for hotels. And this is in Box Studios in Bath, the Real World Studios. Peter Gabriel Studios.
Yeah.
So he produced her album, and I was there. I went to the recording sessions. We chose the tracks together with Katie, and it was an absolute pleasure. And then at the end of the production, we start to listen to everything. And without Katie there, my boss and I just said, well, I said to my boss, I said, this is not, we're not doing justice to this, because this material is incredible and more people need to hear it. We'd kind of Katie and Steve had kind of made an album that was I don't know, very NME, very Q Magazine, very male, very kind of cold. And I knew there was a fragility and a beauty in Katie's voice and in her singing and her lyrics that needed to have a lot more warmth. And I think she'd taken that route because she was a powerful sort of person trying to shout at the world in a way at that point. And Steve was led by that, and Steve was always malleable to that. But we said, no, this is not quite right. So I'd heard about this producer at I think it's called Townhouse Studios in Shepherd's Bush. And he was, he'd not done much, but I really liked what he was doing. His name was Andy Green. And I said, look, can you do something with this? Can we work on this? Can you kind of just work on a couple of tracks? Soften it here, work on the vocal here, add a bit more here so it lifts up the chorus, and just crafting it, like a sculpture that needs to shine a little bit more. And he did, and the results were staggering. So from the basis of what Katie and Steve had produced and Katie's talent, came these couple of songs that were like, wow. And then we'd also worked with Martin Terefe, who's an incredible guy. That is at Townhouse Studios. He runs Townhouse Studios, not the studios in Shepherd's Bush that I was talking about. And he also kind of crafted and recorded with Katie on that album. And in the end, and I remember the moment where we had to call Katie to say, look, we've had to go ahead to try something out on these set of songs that we think could be the singles. Because we think the album was beautiful, but it was limited. It's going to limit you in terms of your appeal to people and we don't think it's doing the songs justice, and the lyrics and what you're trying to portray. And she was furious. She was absolutely furious. She heard the first new mixes, and she just went mad. And she, her manager was calling us saying she's not going to work with you guys. She wants to, she was really not. She did not like that at all. But we convinced her. We sat her down. We talked to her. My boss talked to her, and we went ahead. She wasn't altogether happy with it. But we had a gut feel, and I had a gut feel that we wanted some hits. We wanted this person that I always said about Katie, she's an unstoppable train. She'll just carry on because this is what she does. This is the craft and that she does, and she's so brilliant at it. Yeah. And she's got such a giving nature. A few months later, she was winning Brits and selling millions of albums. And that album, Eye to This Telescope, is one of the most beautiful albums I've ever worked on.
It's a great album.
Andy Green went on to produce a little band called Keen and had one of the biggest albums, had one of the biggest records in the year, that year. And now he's so I kind of got Andy before he really exploded as a producer. So I feel quite proud of that having met Andy and having believed in him as well. But it was a fascinating time, and really, really lovely. The other day I heard one of Katie's new single from her new album. I just tweeted her. I see her. I bump into her at music events once every couple of years, and there's a lot of love for her that I have. And tweeted her just the other day and said, sounds fantastic. Best of luck with the new album. And she tweeted back, just said, well, it's part of your legacy, mate. And so
that was nice.
Really touched me.
That's good. All karma. Nice.
Yeah.
So what I'm conscious of is time, because we want to talk about Ceviche Andina and all these things. But there was one thing I did want to talk about before we skip into all that stuff, which was the great big apple stuff, which was just incredible. Like, that you fitted all this into a lifetime, as well as Ceviche and Andina and all this wonderful stuff. But yeah, just touching on the apple stuff very briefly, and being in the presence of Mr. Jobs and all these things.
So I got a call from a lady called Celine Jeddah, and she was in Cupertino, and she said, Martin, I'm the head recruiter at Apple, and I had a mate at college in Leicester. It's called Richard Howarth, who's now head of Apple Design, full stop. He's taken over Johnny Ive's job, but he was working for Johnny at the time, and he told me about how brilliant Apple was, and I'd known the products. And so she said, look, we're starting this thing called called iTunes. And I just thought that sounded really cool. And I'd been working in digital marketing as well as A&R, but also launching art albums for Katie and Joss Stone and a few others. And so I thought this is pretty cool. And so I took the gig, and there was 5 of us that started iTunes Europe from scratch. We hadn't launched, we hadn't pressed the button, there was still programming to be done, there was still selecting which record labels we're going to work with and all kinds of stuff. And 3.5 years later, the business exploded from zero revenue to $500 million worth of revenue, to a team of 50 people and working across 16 different countries. It was an incredible journey with really, really, really talented people working at Apple, working at iTunes. Really fascinating time to understand that, we were a startup, in effect. You don't think of Apple as that or iTunes as that, but it was absolutely a startup. And I had the pleasure of working with some very, very talented people. The recruitment process, I think, I've never been in a room full of people that I admired so much, to sort of pinch myself and think, gosh, these people around me are, really, really smart people. And
Mr. Jobs?
Well, he was an inspiration for all of us. He was a stickler for quality and particularly for the consumer experience, and left everything behind. Understood all the different elements of the business, obviously, but it all came down to what does the customer want and how do they consume it and how do they absorb it? What's their experience through all this? Obviously, he brought into the product style and the design, his own aesthetics of minimalism and purity, and at the beginning the iPods were all white and all that kind of stuff. And he'd also been sort of battered and bruised through his career. So we weren't allowed to talk to press at any point. We weren't. People called it a cult at the time because we weren't allowed to disclose what we were working on. I didn't work with him at all on a day-to-day basis, so I didn't know how grumpy or not he people say he was. But as I said, he was an inspiration, and he was very much focused on making iTunes a success with under the leadership of the brilliant Eddie Q, who we knew more and who we worked with more closely.
Okay. So then, under your one of 15 pairs of trainers, the feet started itching and a dream was forming. So tell us about that then.
Well, ever since coming to this country, I've always really enjoyed cooking for other people, and food has always been something that's been very important with me to make me feel good and to make my friends feel good, and introducing them to new flavors, particularly from my country of birth, which is Peru. And I'd been watching the marketplace in Peru growing, and people internationalizing Peruvian food. And I've always known that Peruvian food was beautiful and delicious and worthy and one of the best cuisines in the world. Why? Because of the flavors, because of the different variety of ingredients, and that's as a result of migration from many people: Chinese, Japanese, African, Italian, Spanish people, all coming to Peru in the last 500 years, but also of the beauty of indigenous cuisine that dates back thousands of years. We've got one of the most ancient cuisines, and all that coupled with the geography of Peru that has some of the richest seas with the most different types of fish and seafood and altitude with the beautiful mountains, and Peru is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. So we've got the Amazon, we've got the coast, we've got the Andes as well, and different things grown at different ingredients grow at different altitudes. So that gives us, huge scope for flavors. And I just thought, gosh, this is something that really needs to happen here. And as having grown up, in London as well, just thinking, it's a crime that London is becoming a gastronomic city, a city that's got a big foodie scene, but no one really is talking about Peruvian food, and that's just wrong, And I thought now is the time. A passion for wanting to start a restaurant started probably about 20 years ago, probably when I was in my 20s, just thinking, God, it really does need to happen, but when and how, I don't know. And so, even at iTunes, I'd be talking about this to everyone there. Even at Union Square Music before that, people sort of knew I was food obsessed. And then after iTunes, I went to work for Disney for 3 years, and I was just going out a lot, eating around the world, meeting chefs, meeting restaurateurs, and just sort of starting out the journey of thinking, how can a restaurant be put together? What's the ideal? How can we create the most beautiful Peruvian restaurant in London? And so after my time at Disney in 2010, or around my time at Disney, I sort of thought, it's coming close. I can't deny this urge, this need, this idea, this passion, this love. I can't deny it any longer. I can't live with regret. I've always wanted to have my own business. I tried, before I started iTunes, I tried thinking about having a management business where I would manage talent, and we'd work across all kinds of revenue streams for talent, and have hit records and concerts. But that sort of fizzled away when I got the iTunes gig, and I thought that was fascinating. But so in July 2010, I said, that's it. Stop talking about it and get on with it.
And what was the first step? I mean, did you need to, look for some partners to launch it, or that was ready? You've been squirreling away some stuff, and what about finding that site's a cracker, the first site that you got? I mean, geez, that's a plum of a site, and then the branding, the look, the feel is so distinctive, and
So whilst I was at Disney, I thought, look, I really want to do this. So in the evenings, I would try and look at what people were eating. So start at the beginning of the market research. So I would go and stand outside restaurants with a clicker and see how many people are going into different restaurants. I would go into restaurants and see what makes up the restaurant. What is it? Is it the vibe? Is it the atmosphere? Is it the design? I'd look at everything with brand new eyes, with clear and clean eyes. The level of the height of the bars, the uniforms, what bar staff were saying, what waiters were saying. I'd look at the food and how it's made up, and after a while, you start kind of seeing some common traits in different restaurants, and some things you like, some things you don't like, some atmospheres you like, and some places you like, and start understanding the market. So my learning has always been by feeling, by using all my senses as well as my intelligence. And so in a way, that was my market research, as well as buying loads of books from entrepreneurs that had started restaurants or bars, or from basic books like How to Start a Restaurants Business, or restaurant financials for beginners and stuff like that. I bought all those books, all of them, and read them back to back. And of course, listened to Danny Mayer's podcast and bought his book, which I've now bought about 50 copies that I've given away to many people, and many other groundbreaking books. I'd listened to and bought Anthony Bourdain's books years before that, as well as others from other great chefs. And travelled to Peru a lot to learn about our cuisine properly again, and talk to different chefs and restaurateurs. And I did that in London. So I went to see Nuno Mendes when he had a restaurant in East London, and he said, "That's a great idea, Martin. I love ceviche. In fact, I was thinking of doing it myself." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Shall we work together?" I talked to Gillian McLean, who is a phenomenal entrepreneur. I talked to Jean-Michel Aurier. I talked to many people, Sinclair Beecham and Mark Derry, and just fantastic chefs and restaurateurs that I admired, and they all kind of really encouraged me. Really encouraged me. This industry is beautiful, the hospitality industry, because people know how tough it is, and everybody's sort of entrepreneurial. Yeah. Everyone is sort of a self-starter.
I think it's one of the nice things, kind of why I've definitely stayed in this industry as well, is it seems to be that everyone wants to help each other.
That's right.
Which is so odd, because when I worked at lastminute.com or Barclaycard, you didn't talk to your competitors to help them out. Like one of the times I was at Yo Sushi, and I've said this a few times in this podcast, and Robin called me into his office, Robin Rowland, and called me in, "I want you to meet, so and so," and it was like the CEO of Ping Pong, and I was like, "What hide the hide the figures and hide that poster and what it's like. I couldn't believe we were all. And then once you realise that we're all in the business of helping each other, help get people to eat and drink out, then you go, oh, right. Because you can't possibly expect someone to eat and drink out in your place all the time. You could, but it would be a bit much, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of lovely.
It was a nice time. It was a really lovely time, and I felt absolutely welcomed. Having worked in tech, having worked in music and entertainment, this was something quite different. So I was very lucky, and there was a moment where I just then decided to knuckle down and think, what is it that I want? What kind of restaurant that I want? How are we going to craft it? Where would I like to eat? And what do I think is going to be successful for the next 10, 15, 20 years? And that's when the idea for the positioning started, the idea for the name started, the idea for the types of dishes that we would serve, the price point, the type of marketing, the type of ethos as a company or as a restaurant we would have, the location of that we would have to be in. And of course I had a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D on everything of those, because that's just the way my mind thinks. That makes sure that something works.
Yeah.
Because you have to be flexible in business. You have to be flexible in life to some things never work out as you really wanted them, but sometimes those new opportunities, they bring other joy and other directions which are really exciting. But that site in Frith Street, that happened as a result of a whole year of trying to fundraise, which the first third of the year we completely missed that and completely failed. But then in the next 6 months trying to sell my house, which the economy was so bad that I couldn't sell my house because I was going bankrupt at the time because I'd left Disney to do this. But in the end we sold our house and put every little penny that we had into this idea of starting this first restaurant. And it's at that point where the investors that I was trying to pitch at, who had all said no, about 250 of them, a few of them started putting their hand up because they said, oh, Martin must be either crazy or he's onto something, or maybe a bit both, but he's certainly relentless and unstoppable. And he's certainly had, his track record is quite successful everywhere he's worked at. So they believed in me in that way, even though they said, well, he's not been a chef nor a restaurateur before, and he hasn't got 20 years of experience, and there's not another 20 restaurants in London that you can prove are successful as Peruvian restaurants. Yeah. So against the absolute odds, we raised £1 million. And with that million, I walked around London looking for the best sites and wearing down 3 pairs of shoes for 6 months. And in the end, I did a deal directly with the guy that was running a restaurant on Frith Street. We went for a coffee just round the corner and agreed a very fair premium at the time, and that's how I got that site.
And what was the original idea and positioning then? You talked about that. What was the setup, if you were explaining it to someone?
Well, ceviche is our national dish in Peru. It's a dish that's fresh, it's zesty, it's marinated seafood and fish with lime and chili and a little bit of salt and many other ingredients. There's different recipes, but I wanted that to represent the whole of Peruvian food and the whole of this idea of being fresh and interesting and a new breath of fresh air in the restaurant industry. And also represent the food of the coast, the food of Lima, the Creole cuisine, as we call it in Peru, that I'd grown up with, the food of my great aunts, food that has soul, soulful cuisine from Lima in a way. Yep. Food with a bit of funk, a bit of chicha, as we call it. Chicha is like funk in Peru, and it's not just a drink, an alcoholic drink. It's also a way of thinking. It's also an art movement, actually. Okay. And so that's why we chose the name ceviche, and we chose ceviche as one of the many dishes, cold and hot, that we served from the many categories. And I want this place to be for everyone. I'm not a fan of segregation. I'm not a fan of, certainly not of discrimination or of elitism or of tribes even. I'm just a fan of, openness.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I'd like a student on very little money to be able to come here, but I also like someone from the city being able to enjoy themselves. I'd love it if women felt comfortable in our restaurants and felt like they're eating something healthy. But if there's a girl that wants to have a guilty pleasure, well, there might be some cheeky fried food as well.
Yeah.
But I wanted a safe space for people. Some people say it's democratic or whatever. I don't know how to phrase that, but
just for everyone. Yeah,
open. So price point was really important. Design of the restaurant was pretty important, not to alienate people both by being too casual or too smart. The approach with which we cared for our customers from the staff side, well, it's very human, and that's what I wanted. So people don't think it's either too stuffy or lazy. On the other hand, and we put all those things into the mix. And I say we. At the beginning, it was me and a lady called Raquel de Oliveira, who's still to this day side by side running the business with me and running our restaurants. Because Raquel has been a huge inspiration. She's the one with the 20, 30 years of experience in the industry. Okay. And so together we crafted this idea from the very beginning. And we opened Ceviche in February 2012 to huge success, because we'd been talking about this through supper clubs and pop-up restaurants, through Twitter and through Facebook and through my blog. Yeah. And luckily we had tons of support from foodies, from chefs, from journalists, and we've not looked back. Yeah. So Ceviche in Soho is still there. It's a much loved restaurant. It's buzzy, it's funky, it's noisy, it's exciting, and it spawned other restaurants, and it spawned cookbooks, and it spawned a pop-up restaurant tour around the UK, and all kinds of fun things that we've done. And it spawned a sister, which is Andina.
Yeah. So what was the moment then where you thought, God, this is going well. This is not quite, I've made it, but God, this is going good.
Well, I guess after 3 months or 6 months, almost living in the building. I used to sleep in there sometimes to make sure everything was going well.
Oh, God.
And sometimes when British Gas let us down, or someone like that, or Thames Water, we had some real serious scares and serious panic. So I sometimes slept in that restaurant downstairs in the office. But I just, the feeling of being in the back of the room and watching a restaurant that's buzzing full of people just enjoying themselves is a great moment. And I guess, we had an explosive start. We still have queues out the door, but we certainly did then. And we just thought, gosh, this could we could create more restaurants. And so, I just sort of thought, Ceviche is amazing. It's beautiful as an individual restaurant, and hopefully we can tell this story in other places. But I also have another story to tell, and that's the story of my grandma and the story of the Andes. And why not treat people with that story as well, which is a different gastronomy as well. And so that's why we opened Andina in Shoreditch about 1.5 years later.
And then, so the decision, location-wise, did you feel that was going to be a stretch, or is it not too bad just having them a little bit apart, operations-wise, and all that stuff?
Well, I just sort of, I just, I wanted to open a restaurant where we thought people would love us. Yeah. And, the kind of customers that like us are people that like to travel, people that are creative. And that, that means just about everyone, frankly. But there's a big concentration of those kind of people, in various parts of London, and Shoreditch was a natural fit. And we found a fantastic site, which took about 1.5 years. Well, it took about a year to kind of put together, because it wasn't a restaurant before; it was an office. So it'd been an office for 100 years. Actually, it was a tailor, I think, 150 years ago. And we transformed that into a restaurant, thanks to the council there and thanks to the neighbours. And we opened Andina to, as an experiment, actually, because that food, the food of the Andes, had never been talked about, let alone outside of Peru, but certainly not in London. At the time, people didn't know how to even pronounce the word quinoa.
Yes.
And quinoa is now, you find that everywhere.
Yeah.
In Tesco's, in
There's still a debate.
etc.
There's still a debate on pronunciation sometimes.
Absolutely, but there is, I knew that was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the incredible ingredients Peru and the Andes have to offer, and the techniques and the gastronomy and the flavors that the Andes have to offer. And for all the talk from all kinds of fine dining chefs who are discovering what they say as something new, we've had in the Andes of Peru for thousands of years, and as traditions from my grandmother and other great women cooks and chefs who run kitchens and run restaurants in the Andes, because they predominate. We've had zero. We've worked with zero waste from day one. It's natural to us. We've been organic from day one. Yeah. We've been farm to table from day one. It's not a fashion or a fad. It's something that
the way of life.
Andina people and Andina women and Andina restaurants are all about, and that's what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah. And then, just in terms of, I guess you've made it harder for yourself, having these different concepts. I think it would have been easy for you just to roll out, I suppose, as one concept. So, what's the challenges been then with you having the different sets? And then also, that's not the only sort of concepts that you have as well. You've got some other things as well, because you've got the I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but the panaderia and the picanteria as well. And you've got all these different bits. You've made it hard for yourself, right? You've not made it easy, but you might bear the fruits of that.
Our mission as a company, we've always said, it's to enrich people's lives with excellence in Peruvian restaurants, food, drinks, and the arts. And it's a beautiful concept to follow, I think, and that inspires, customers as well as my team. And that means we have to. We're there to express ourselves, but certainly more importantly to fulfill the needs of what we think our customers want. And so on the food side, we also don't think we're limited by a space that could be just a restaurant. And so that's why we started a record label. I used to work in records, as you know, so people wanted to know what the music was that we played in our restaurants. Well, let's give it to people. So that's why we started Tiger's Milk Records. They loved the artwork in some of our restaurants, so we thought, gosh, no one is really supporting Peruvian art like they're not supporting Peruvian music, and it's beautiful and the world should know about it. So we created an art gallery inside Ceviche Old Street. And also we're very linked to Amantani, a charity that I've supported for over 10 years as a trustee. And so that's part of our DNA as well. And so that, that creates a whole ecosystem of really beautiful arts and culture that surrounds restaurants and experiences. It's more of an experience. It's an entertainment. It's educational in some way, but it's fun and it's enriching. And that's always been a key ethos of mine. But, our focus really is on Ceviche as a restaurant's business and Andina as a restaurant's business. And we look for wonderful neighborhoods that where one of these two ideas will flourish. Ceviche being more coastal, more urban, more noisy, more bustly, more cocktails, more tapas, more funky food, healthy, cheeky, place with swing, and Andina being a little bit more calm, because that's the Andes, more rural, more nutritious in a way, a bit more health focused, a bit more calmer colours and less hectic, and all day dining with breakfast, brunch, dinner. And so that's why we created Andina Bakery, Andina Panaderia, little Andina Bakery, because we were doing wonderful breakfasts and brunches, but we wanted to have that, we wanted to present that creativity and that heritage of baking breads and pastries that comes from the Andes of Peru and comes from Peru. And so we opened Andina Bakery and a little restaurant next door called Andina in Notting Hill about 4 months ago, and that's been a huge success. So, but it's also to to excite people and surprise our fans. And so that's why we've kept it varied, but with those two very clear propositions that could fit into all kinds of locations, as long as there's a customer base that is open-minded enough, excited enough, and is looking for, great healthy eating with big flavors and places with a lot of color and positivity.
And then just thinking as well about you, you have a very strong personal brand as well, like that or not like that. But you do. So, wonderful appearances on, Saturday Kitchens of this world and all these things, which a lot of people would, just, jump at the chance of and all these things. What are you thinking about that sort of stuff? Because that kind of thing seems to come quite naturally to you. And, I think you seem very comfortable with that. I think you seem to do that really well.
Look, I've always been a guy in the back of the room, working behind the scenes. I've nurtured talent from the age of 18 through concert promoting, through working at record labels. Yes, I was a DJ, and that puts you front of house. So I understood what being a performer was about, in a way, the highs and the lows that come with that, which are incredibly unbalancing. So you have to be very, very careful with that. And as I mentioned in this chat, I've worked with music artists as well and launching their careers, and I'm very, very comfortable behind the scenes, driving and oiling, a project well and crafting it and carving it, with the final thing not having my face on it. The beginnings of Ceviche were different. There was no one. It was just me on my own and my idea. So there was nobody else I could put in front. No one really understood how to do this. No one had worked out how to cook this food in this country, let alone start a restaurant, because the ingredients were here, and I had to work all those things out at the beginning myself, and laying those foundations, and then teaching others that have now, many of which have become my team. Now there's more of those kind of people around, but at the beginning there wasn't. So in the last few years, I guess I've done less of that. Mm-hmm. But I guess with our success, my profile has grown. But I'd like to think that I've also brought other people forward, chefs, front of house people. I mentioned Raquel. I mentioned that there have been chefs that have worked with us that are incredibly fascinating and interesting. Chef Daniel Ribeiro, who's our group head chef, Zoltan Varga, who runs our drinks, our group bars manager, people like that are highly creative, that have been working with us for many, many years, and whom I've taken to Peru and who've shared so much, who've come up with many, many other ideas of new dishes or new drinks. And so they're part of the team, and I can't do what I do at all without them. In fact, I oversee the whole lot with Raquel, but I also just work on certain aspects of the business because time is limited, and I'm not great at a lot of those things that other people work on. But
did you get a kick out of going on the Saturday Kitchens of this world and stuff? Do you enjoy it?
Well, actually, it absolutely petrifies me, to be honest. It absolutely petrifies me.
Doesn't show.
It, I remember when I used to go DJing, before I'd be on a gig, I'd get stomach problems and I'd have to go to the toilet, and it was pretty embarrassing sometimes. It makes me nervous going on a TV appearance from about a week before it, and that whole week is almost spoiled because I'm I'm nervous about that performance. Mm-hmm. I right or wrong, I thought it's important as part of me in my, in a way, ambassadorial role for Peruvian food, which I say ambassadorial with a lowercase a, but because, I want to make sure that our cuisine is represented authentically. And I've seen it happen with so many cultures throughout my life in this country, where people have interpreted or tried to use culture, particularly Latin cultures, in a certain way, and exploited them in negative ways. Attached stuff that is negative to certain cultures, and I'm not about to let that happen, at least with Peru. And so that's why I said, look, I'm going to be right at the front there. I'm going to be telling the story right how it is. I'm going to become the expert, and so nobody can tell me, So if somebody else comes along and tries to kind of exploit it for the wrong reasons, and then tries to spin it in a negative way, they'll kind of, the right people will sway back to me and just see, well, what does Martin think about this?
Yeah.
And how is he doing that? And so hopefully that helps our culture, our tradition, people working in food in Peru, people representing ingredients and the truth about certain ingredients come out in the right way. Because my impetus, the reason why I'm doing this is hopefully people can see it's genuine.
It's authenticity,
and it's for the well-being of all those things I've mentioned.
Yeah. So, last couple of things then, while I've got you, was just for anyone listening, really, and it was a bit of inspiration, really, was just, any tips on the challenges that you've found, the lessons you've learned, really, in, opening the restaurants, whether it's been with the first one or the latest one, or just, anything you think.
Many. I think I've mentioned one of them. One of them is have several plans: Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. So if you think that your cuisine is Mediterranean and you think you want to start a sandwich shop selling Mediterranean sandwiches, okay, well, how look at all those things. So sandwich, Mediterranean, shop. Okay, so what else can you do with that? There's Mediterranean, so what other things can you do with Mediterranean food? What other things can you do with sandwiches? What other things can you do in that shop? And just think about all of those so you have various plans in case one of those things doesn't quite go right as you initially thought. Secondly, about your Mediterranean sandwich shop, talk to as many people as you can about it that have done Mediterranean sandwiches and had shops, or had done sandwiches, or had worked in Mediterranean food, or have had shops. And ask them about their experiences, humbly, nicely, promising them that you'll do something for them as well, and talking to them about how much you admire what they've done, genuinely. And so all the people that have mentored me or given me advice that I still need and I still talk to today all the time, as well as people that come to me, but I also ask for help all the time. They help me craft different truths that might come through. And linked to that is listening to those things. If you close your ears and just think and just listen to your ego about what some things might be right, then you'll lose. You need to listen to those people because they will tell you what customers want. And ultimately, also just look at people, understand society and how it works, and understand the different ways people are evolving and changing, and look at their lifestyles. And linked to all of that before, in terms of what I said, is also just ask for help. We can't do anything on our own. We have to build teams. You have to reward everyone. Mm-hmm. You have to be selfless. You have to guide and mentor and support and find ways of getting to that point where people feel free in their job and feel happy to work, because people are not on this earth really to work for money. They're on this earth to find a purpose and really enjoy the ride. Money is also important, but it's not essential in that way for many people, and that's how you build teams.
Great advice. Very last thing, what's next for Martin Morales and the Ceviche Empire? This year has been about running our 5 restaurants and a bakery, launching that restaurant in Notting Hill, Andina, and the bakery, Andina Bakery. And also between October and December, we have a festival that we have at Ceviche Old Street. Ceviche Old Street is our award-winning restaurant and art gallery, music venue as well. And it's a festival called Amazonia. And it's, as you can imagine, a festival focused around the food of the Amazon of Peru. No one's ever done that before. We've served
dishes influenced by the Amazon of Peru several times at Ceviche. But for the first time at Ceviche and Ceviche Old Street, we're going to focus on a whole show about that whole festival, which includes gastronomy, includes dishes and drinks, but it also includes art. So we're flying over from Peru on the 11th of October, and the 12th of October we're going to have Pedro Miguel Schiaffino, who's a friend and also one of the world's best chefs, who has a restaurant in Lima called Amaz, as well as his award-winning restaurant called Malabar. And he's coming over to cook for us and cook with me and present several dishes with ingredients that have never touched the UK soil before, that are going to be fascinating. And then we're doing a show with some of Peru's best contemporary artists who have worked with Amazonian themes. Amazonian art is fascinating. It's really exciting. There's a buzz around it in the art world. So we're the first in the UK to ever present it here. So that's between October and December at Ceviche Old Street.
Amazing.
And then it's the run up to Christmas.
Yeah,
we always have a fascinating, fantastic New Year's Eve parties at our restaurants.
I used your social media post from last New Year's Eve as an example. At a social media course we were doing on Thursday. So
Thank you very much.
It's a very good shot. Lady in the green dress.
Yeah, that's Sarah. She's the partner of a fantastic DJ called Natty Bow, and she's an incredible performer herself.
Just a phenomenal shot. Just took you back to some other time, other world.
Yeah, she's a great dancer and a great person.
Phenomenal. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in. This has been epic. Absolutely epic. We could have had part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, but I'm sure we'll do it again when we're both a bit cheerier and less Qatari. But yeah, just wish you well with everything that you do. You're such a good soul of a man, so such a kind man too. So thank you for all your advice over the years and help and support, and yeah, just keep doing good things. And yeah, your impact is noticed by everyone. So yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much to Martin Morales for coming into the Spectacular Marketing Podcast today. Hopefully some inspiration for everyone. He certainly is to me, and I really, really mean that. Please check out the podcast notes for more information about Martin, Ceviche Andina, and all of the various projects that he and the Ceviche and Andina team are involved in. Thanks to everyone who's written a review, shared with a friend, gets in touch on a weekly basis, and has also downloaded the Spectacular Marketing Podcast. We're also reaching the heady heights of number 62 in the iTunes business charts on a weekly basis, so thank you so much for that. Huge thanks to Gaz, Gabby and Mahal for all of their hard work in putting the podcast together too. I'm Mark McCulloch, and this was Spectacular.